It's Song Talk Radio with Michael, Neil, Phil, and the gang.
Welcome to Song Talk Radio, the fantastic show with songwriters talking to other songwriters about the craft of songwriting. We share tips and tools, chisels, hammers, everything you need to become better at writing songs. I am one of your hosts, Mike Proutman. With me are other members of the Song Talk Radio Action team, my co-hosts, Vanessa Vreeland. Hello, Vanessa. How are you?
Hi.
Phil Emery.
Present in accounting.
Excellent. Present. Here, sir. And Neil Modi. Neil, how are you?
I'm pretty good. When I write songs, I tend to use a screwdriver more than anything else.
And because you're a good Canadian boy, it's a Robertson head screwdriver.
Robertson head, not the Phillips.
Exactly.
Yes.
Better for gripping and griping. During our show, please feel free to send your comments and questions to @SongTalkRadio on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or at feedback@songtalk.ca, and we will share them with the rest of you. And please visit us at Song Talk to find out how you might be able to be a guest on our show. And other things you can do is you can send us your songs, which was really nice. Phil,
Phil Rodeo sent us a little link to his song, and it was just a preview, but it sounded really good. But we love hearing what our listeners do. It's great for us to know that you're getting value from the show. And on that thought, if you happen to be in your iTunes, it would be really helpful if you could actually write a review for the show in iTunes. That really does help other people find the show, and it gets the podcast up in the podcast rankings. So a little thing about just saying how we're amazing, we're the best thing ever, and
So the truth, just basically tell the truth. You don't have to embellish.
Crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Express how good we are at being crappy. Yeah.
That would be so awesome. You'd love that.
All right. Wonderful. And speaking of wonderful, tonight we are talking about the great John Prine, this American treasure, perhaps a modern-day Mark Twain, a peerless songwriter and chronicler of the lives of regular folk, sadly passed away recently, one of the many victims of this COVID-19 pandemic. Mm-hmm. And since his death, many of today's music stars have sung his praises as a musician and also as a great human being. And he is a great songwriter and wonderfully articulate about the craft of songwriting. So tonight we're going to pay tribute to the great modern songwriter, John Prine. Mm. Now, sorry, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, the thing I loved about him is that his songs are very kind of bare, like you really see the songwriting craft. It's not filled, like he's never trying to be too clever. But if you listen to his songs, you can learn so much about how to write songs, and just in terms of catchy melodies, but they're plain and they're simple. And also the imagery is so evocative, and you should read some of the articles that have been written about John Prine, because he actually talks about songwriting in a really, really thoughtful way. Like a lot of people, you read interviews and they just kind of say, I just got inspired, I was inspired. Where John Prine actually talks specifically about his craft. It's really impressive.
In a wonderfully evocative way, you can see where his lyrics come from. He talks about a month after my divorce, a truck pulled up and dumped a month's worth of songs on my yard. It's a great way of describing it. Neil, were you familiar with John Prine?
I admit that only after we started this podcast, so many years ago, that his name dropped on the show a few times, and I didn't know who he was. I certainly didn't know about him growing up or listening to, rock music and alternative stuff in the 90s and stuff. He wasn't on my radar at all until we started talking about doing the show. And this is the first time I've heard a few of his songs. And I fully agree with Phil. Like you can really see the craftsmanship that he puts into these things. Like every word, every note is sort of really carefully thought out and placed. And certainly there's some of the imagery is interesting. Although some of it, it didn't really speak to me as such, because he's referring to very specific things. Sometimes I found that a little bit, but certainly memorable songs and like you say, Phil, like melodies that are not outwardly catchy. Because I remember at one point I was listening to his songs and thinking, the test we always say. When you're trying to write melodies is divorce them from the lyrics, like just whistle them or hum them or sing la la la's, and then you'll know if it's actually a good melody. And I was thinking to myself, maybe his melodies are not that strong, and he's dependent more on the lyrical content. But then the next day I was like, no, that song's still stuck in my head. Like it's catchy enough without being like overly poppy.
Yeah. In a way that I agree with you, they're not pop songs with these big, heavy melodic hooks. But when you hear, he was perhaps better known by people covering his songs and his own versions of the songs.
Like
and
Leonard
that's
Cohen.
always an interesting, like Leonard Cohen. And that's always a good test, I think, of what's a good songwriter, because you have vastly different people doing songs in different styles, and you still can hear the bones of the song within there. I thought, okay, that is, even if you don't recognize it at first, you go, okay, that's got to be a pretty strong song that it can take all these different interpretations. I find Neil Young is like that as well. Yeah. There's a collection of his songs done by a very disparate group of people on an album called The Bridge, which was a benefit for, I think, cerebral palsy. And you realize, oh my God, like they're doing electropop versions of Neil Young songs, and it still sounds like a Neil Young song, Yeah. Vanessa, what was this an introduction to John Prine for you, or were you a fan before?
No, same. It was an introduction as well, but really interesting reading the articles that you sent along to us about him. And I'm not as well, I don't know as well like songwriters and all that, as well as you guys do. So I thought, well, I haven't heard of him, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything because, I'm not a songwriting aficionado. But it was really interesting to read all about him and his life and career and that. And I thought, I had no idea.
Well, that's actually an interesting question, because like, is he the kind of songwriter that appeals to songwriters and musicians, or especially songwriters? Because like, Bonnie Raitt does one of his songs and then it's super popular, right? But when he does it, maybe not so much. So is it, and especially when you talk about cover songs, because if a lot of songwriters appreciate him for his craft, does the general population care about such things?
Well, I wonder. He's also, being a popular artist is not just about having good songs. There's also an image, and they're willing to play the game. And he had not much of an image. He was he looked like what he used to be, a mailman, and he was pretty self-effacing. And he wasn't much for. As a stage presence, he told wonderful stories, but he wasn't, blessed with too much charisma or anything like that. So a lot of things go into being a star, and it wasn't something he wanted to be. He liked to write songs, and he loved to connect with people. So I'm not sure if that is a reflection of anything or just his choice to a certain
Did he
degree.
get lots of radio play back in the day?
No, but I got to know his songs more after the fact, because I would go see. I'm from the East Coast, and there's a lot of, when you go to bars, there's like a guy with an acoustic guitar singing songs. And I realize now they all played John Prine songs. They're great for, that sort of thing, because they catch your ear. They're like, they're melodic, and also what he sang about was, they weren't just love songs, so they weren't just even necessarily, even his protest songs weren't overtly so. They were amazing. Almost every one of them would draw you in. If you were sitting in a bar and you heard this song, even if it wasn't well played, you go, oh, but that sounds like a song about something. Like, for instance, like right out of the gate, his first album had these amazing songs that still, when you hear them, you go, wow. You listen to it, you go, wow, that took something to write, to come from that perspective and to put it there. One, we should just play a little bit of it. Sam Stone, which he had been in the war, or had been drafted into the Vietnam War, but I think he just like served in Germany in a service.
He was an
trucks
engineer
or
a mechanic or something.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't see any action, but a lot of people he knew did, and as he said, a lot of them came home in boxes, and came home changed. He says, because there was so many drugs available in Vietnam, and he'd said, drugs were powerful. People would come home and they weren't the same people, and all of that entered into what he wrote in Sam Stone. So I don't know. Let's take a listen to that, and then we'll talk about it for a bit.
Sam Stone came home to his wife and family after serving in the conflict overseas. And the time that he served had shattered all his nerves and left a little shrapnel in his knee. But the morphine eased the pain, and the grass grew around his brain, and gave him all the confidence he lacked. With a purple heart and a monkey on his back, there's a hole in Daddy's arm where all the money goes. Jesus Christ died for nothing, I suppose. Little pitchers have big ears, don't stop to count the years. Sweet songs never last too long on broken radios.
So, too, what I was saying, that's Sam Stone about his fellow soldiers in Vietnam. If you were sitting in a bar and you heard someone sing the chorus, "There's a hole in Daddy's arm where all the money goes. Jesus Christ died for nothing, I suppose," that would catch your attention. And then the little details a bit later on, like he's not sentimentalizing it. He's not. I mean, he's pretty upfront that the guy is sort of a bad father. He said he eased his mind in the hours that he chose while the kids ran around wearing other people's clothes.
What a great line!
Yeah. And even he's got a sense of humor, or like at least he knows wordplay when he talks about when he popped his last balloon, which has a double meaning in that when a balloon pops, it's done, but also often heroin was sold in balloons, baggies. So, just such a clever and heartfelt writer.
I loved the line. He came back with a purple heart and a monkey on his back.
Yeah.
Just.
I think the thing with John Prine songs is you kind of go through the whole song going, "Oh, I like this line. Yeah, I like this line." It's not like you wait for the one good line. The whole thing, it just goes from great line to great line.
Yep. So it says here that he died on April the 7th of this year from complications to COVID at 73, and that his songs were then streamed 20 million times in 2 days after that because he had such an impact.
Yeah, and sadly, I think in his death, he's become a lot more popular.
Yeah.
Even because he had cancer and beat it, and I think his most successful album was his last one. Like so many people were late to the party and are now, I think, really regretting what they had missed when he was alive. I think if somehow he had gotten more attention, he would have. I mean, I don't know if he wanted it. I'm sure he wanted to have to make more money off his songs and have more people hear them. But in time, I think more people will now.
I think he. I think he did professionally quite well. I mean, I think he was. I have a feeling as successful as he wanted to be. He has like a family and a house, and I don't think he ever wanted to be a celebrity.
No, I don't think so.
There's actually a YouTube video of John Prine doing Sam Stone, and just him with a guitar, and it's actually it's kind of my favorite version of it because it's just so plain, it's so pure, and you really focus on his delivery, and it's not like he's not a great vocalist, but he was still able to put the songs across, I think. you know?
Yeah, and like you guys are saying, like there's certainly a sense that about the content, like the content is really king here. Like the song is about something, and it's not preachy. He's not like, oh, look at the point I'm trying to make here. It's literally just his interpretation and his description. Like it's very personal in that way. Like it's not a clinically cold description of the experiences of these people, but it's poetic and it's kind of haunting and sort of beautiful and it's in its own way, right? Like he's really got his own identity intertwined in the story.
It's great because he actually talks about that. He was saying that, as a songwriter, it's better to be specific about the things that are there, like the color of the ashtray or how far the door was, and to sort of to paint the scene, but not to paint the emotions, and let the viewer, listener, put themselves into the song and build their own emotions. And I think that's one of the reasons why his songs are so effective, because they are specific about things, like Purple Heart, a monkey on his back, or kids running around in other people's clothes. I mean, he's specific about things within the environment, but not specific about the emotions.
Yeah, he's not telling you how to feel about the situation, but he's describing it with such sympathy and such a good eye that you have a great sense of not just his life, but how it affects his kids and how he's seen by other people. It's a very rich portrait.
There's another line he mentions, and I guess the next song we're going to do is The Angel from Montgomery, I think.
Let's say that for the end, because we're going to rock it out. Let's talk about Souvenirs.
Okay.
Because I thought it was interesting where that came from. When he was a kid at the carnival, his brother went missing, and he thought, and he looked up to his brother, loved his brother, idolized his brother, and he, at that moment, being a young child, thought he's gone forever, and had this, I guess, took it a bit more seriously, and it was serious enough that years later, as a grown adult, he still could tap into that feeling of loss that he'd had as a kid and use it as sort of the framework of the inspiration for a song called Souvenirs, which has, for me, a lovely bunch of lines where I hate graveyards and old pawn shops, for they always bring me tears. I can't forgive the way they robbed me of my childhood souvenirs. And I think it's the use of the word forgive in there that just, brings a bit more drama into it. But the way he took ordinary life and found a way to make it, like, I think as a songwriter, it sometimes, and we've had other guests talk about, if you're too on the nose, and that sort of is what you're talking about being specific about details, but letting the emotions come from the audience. If you're too on the nose, then you're not leaving anywhere to go, So finding ways to, new ways to approach it, or to, take your feelings and then let it reverberate out from that.
Yeah, they're trying to. You want to be specific enough to convey the environment, but open enough for people to put themselves in the song. And I think that's the key.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to make up words if they work, as he does. Memories, they can't be boughten.
Yes, boughten.
I use button all the time.
All right, well, let's take a little listen to Souvenirs. And
all the snow's turned to water. Christmas days have come and gone. Broken toys and faded colors are all that's left to linger on. I hate graveyards and old pawn shops, for they always bring me tears. I can't forgive the way they rob me of my childhood souvenirs. Memories that can't be bought, they can't be won at carnivals for free. Well, it took me years to get those souvenirs, and I don't know how they slipped away from me.
All right. So something occurred to me when I listened to that. Is he musically? He actually, again, the melodies and the music is very deceptive. But I think there's something, because he is not perhaps the greatest singer, or the music is not overly embellished, the strength of the melodies are really hidden, you know. But you know, it's just listen to that again. It goes, it's really clear. Like, you could, Neil, to your point, you could hum that without words, and you'd recognize that song very clearly.
Yeah. His melodies sound almost traditional, which is an interesting goal to go for. You know, like, it sounds like they're old traditional, you know, folk songs from, like, you know, 100 years ago. But yeah, it's great.
He used to be a mailman, as I said, and he wrote his songs on the route, or the route, depending on where you come from. And I wonder if the pace of walking is in the rhythm of the songs sometimes.
That's true.
Because I always find that that's a wonderful rhythm to write to. The amble, the pace, you know.
I mean, I haven't heard that many songs, but I tend to think that most of his songs are that kind of medium tempo, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, some are ballads and quite slow, and some, there's one, Illegal Smile, which actually has some really strange tempo shifts in it. But often, yeah, the songs are, in his version anyway, very, like this, very traditional folk strummed or finger picked like that.
And that's what we mean when we talk about stuff like prosody, as in, like, if there's a conversational tone to the lyrics, then there's kind of an easygoing pace to the rhythm and to the melodies, and so, like, everything just kind of fits together in that kind of mode of thinking, right? Like, that's the kind of central feeling, and he's good at extending that throughout the various elements of the music.
I think it fits with his kind of storyteller persona.
Yeah.
But, for example, when Bonnie Raitt did his song Angel from Montgomery, she made it, it's a song about a woman, a housewife, who's feeling that, you know, her life has slipped away and she just wants to be kind of rescued from it, I think. I mean, there's probably other interpretations of it. But she slows it down to make it almost mournful and dirge-like. And then the version I'd like to play by a Toronto band called Leslie Spit Trio rocks it the hell out, and it's fantastic. It's so kind of angry and
gritty.
There's, I forget the line. It's like, how can you work all day and come on and have nothing to say? And the way she sings that line is like, you can just sense the frustration.
I want to mention, talk about, because he actually talks specifically about this song, and this is a great guide for people writing a song, who want to write songs. And to come up with a character and put yourself in that character and write from that character. And on Angel of Montgomery, it was I had this really vivid picture of this woman standing over the dishwater with soap in her hands and just walking away from it all. So I just kept that whole image in my mind when I was writing the song. I just let it pour out of the character. I didn't realize at the time, but if you come up with a strong enough character, you can get a really vivid insight into the character that you've invented. You let the character write the song. You just dictate, and from then on, you stick to it, and whatever the character is saying, you have to figure out how to keep that in the song, you know? That's how I do it. I almost go into a trance. And he's sort of like almost like a novelist, because that's what novelists do, is they come up with a character and they figure out who that character is, the backstory, and they write a story from that character. And it's not something I've not really done. I've always written from a very, me sort of centric, because, I'm awesome. And
that is what a lot
I
of
often
novelists,
write from Phil's point of view as well, because he's awesome.
And that is what a lot of novelists say, is that when they write the backstory to a character and they start to develop the character themselves then takes over and sort of guides their way and writes.
It makes
writes
it
their own
easier
story.
in some ways. I've written some screenplays, and when you have good, solid characters, they do the work for you sometimes.
Sometimes they do stuff and you're going like, don't do that.
And you gotta learn to not tell them what to do, because you're gonna make them do something boring. They're gonna do something crazy.
Exactly. They know best. They know themselves better than you do.
And it is very helpful as a songwriter. I've had occasion sometimes to write in that format. I was out with another musician friend of mine, and we went to see a band at the Horseshoe. And while we were there, we met. This is during the Second Iraq War, and we met a guy named Jeremy Hinsman, I think his name is, and he was at that time fairly famous for being a deserter. And so we met him. We were talking to him, and afterwards, my friend and I kind of went, let's write a song from his point of view, and kind of like dared each other, okay, who can write it first? And so we went, I went home and wrote a song from the point of view of someone who had deserted the Iraq War. Yeah. And I found it very kind of freeing to be, and I remember, so writing about, they got, about being in Canada, they got stronger beer and they don't mind the queers. And, they're just someone who's approaching what I see familiarly every day. It really helped give me a perspective on it.
I've actually started writing a song from a character's point of view, and it's been an interesting challenge, because it's not something normally, but it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I would imagine that a couple times at least. Yeah,
especially if you have writer's block, it's a good way to shake that.
True that.
It's true.
New songwriting challenge. Yep.
That would be a good songwriting challenge for for the next one. Before we run out of too much time, let's take a listen to, this is how I discovered John Prine, or consciously discovered John Prine. And I knew this was a John Prine song when I was listening to it. Like I said, I'd heard other people do it without realizing the songs they were singing were John Prine songs. But this one I heard, it was very popular, much music in the early days, and it was a great kick-ass band. So let's take a listen to this version of Angel of Montgomery. Not the way John Prine would have done it. So that was a nice blast of Toronto fresh air, and a great example of how his songs can be bent into so many different shapes and not lose like the ability to grab your ear. You go, like, you knew that what she was singing about was something very important, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, her vocal.
His music traveled up here to Toronto, you know, down south, like it, you know, spans all over.
Exactly. Apparently the phrase "an angel from Montgomery," and I don't know if this is true, I just read it in one of the articles, was it meant getting a call from the warden, you know, if you're on death row.
Oh,
So, you know, about, you know, being saved or relieved or something like that. So, yeah, definitely not a phrase that people in Toronto would be familiar with. But, yeah, the song still works.
and what an amazing performance by the vocalist, who is just on the verge of exploding at every second, you know? Yeah, really kicked butt.
She's now, Laura Hewitt is now doing jazz. She's released a couple of jazz records.
Oh, very cool. Oh, very cool. Yeah, definitely.
Leslie Street Trio is no longer a thing, I guess.
No, they. One of the I think the guitarist left to be an actor, and then they were no longer the trio, so they were just Leslie Spit, and then they became another band and had a different incarnation, but they were most successful as the Leslie Spit Trio, I think.
Right.
Yeah, they were quite the thing.
And they had the dog that's in the video, Tag. Yeah, he got credit for some of the songs and I think for being their manager. And so I think when Tag passed away, that's when they said that's why the band broke up.
Oh no,
they didn't want to manage them.
Yeah, amazing what holds a band together.
Exactly.
But, you know, we will put into the show notes. Michael did a whole bunch of research on this and got some great articles, links to articles.
Yes.
Put those in the show notes because they're really great. They're actually really good reading from a songwriter standpoint, because he really does talk about songwriting in a very
pretty well. Go to John Prine University and you will learn how to write songs. You can't help but be inspired and educated by listening to his songs and listening to him talk about how he wrote them. And last Thursday, I think it was, there was a special with a bunch of artists doing a tribute to John Prine. That's still available on YouTube. It's called Picture This, and we'll put the link in our show notes as well.
Cool.
I think that's about all the time we have, isn't it, folks?
Indeed.
Goodness, it goes by so quickly. So thank you all for listening, and yes, go learn all you can about John Prine. He will make your life as a songwriter way better. So send us your impressions, please, of our shows or of Neil's hair to Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Song Talk Radio.
You really want bad reviews?
No, it's good hair. It's good hair.
It is good hair, I have to admit.
Yeah, or send us an email at feedback@songtalk.ca, and be sure to check out our YouTube channel. You'll see live performances from shows past, and you can see us in little boxes now that we're doing this virtually, which is very exciting. And you can subscribe to our podcasts, the Song Talk Radio podcast, on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher.com, Spotify, Podcast Addict. Just, where you get your podcasts, get us. And you'll find links to a lot of what we talked about, as well as books and web services and other interesting websites on our resources page at songtalk.ca. And also, we have another Song Talk meetup, virtual edition, Monday, June 22nd from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, live online. It's free to join, and go to songtalk.ca for a link to join us at the meetup. And if you want even more of us, well, you can find me at Proudfoot420. Vanessa, where would we find you in this virtual world?
Sunny_Vanessa on Instagram, and I think Twitter as well. It's the same name.
Okay, very nice. Neil, where are you at?
NeilModi.com. That's all my centrals.
Wonderful. And that's where we get your music and your musings on life, and actually some really interesting articles. Your blog?
My blog is fascinating and very insightful, in fact.
Okay.
So I'm told.
It's as insightful as Phil is amazing, so you must check everyone out. Phil, where do they find you?
On The Phil Emery on Twitter.
Exactly. The Phil Emery.
Not Phil Emery.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't
Don't
go
accept any
other-
substitutes.
Phil Emery.
They're fake accounts.
Daft.
Yes.
And please stop by our website at songtalk.ca to browse past shows and find out how you could possibly be a guest, and also send us your songs. We'd love to hear them. Keep on writing. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Writing.